morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm again here at allpointtv.com, and also want to welcome Facebook and our partners across the street over here at WFOV, and that's 92.1 on the radio dial. You can pick them up there. They are an all-night station, all-day station, and we do the airing over there on Fridays and also Saturday afternoon.
Yes, a Saturday afternoon at 12 o'clock, and I think it's 12 a.m. Saturday, too, isn't it? Or,
yeah, been very good about broadcasting the program. I want to thank Paul Herring over there. And Paul, you are doing an absolutely outstanding job keeping the studio up and running and doing just a great job of doing that. I want to commend you for the fine work you do in the community as well. I have to also commend Odyssey House that brings those programs on that network, and they are there and going strong. I want you to continue to have a lot of blessings along the lines of what you're trying to do. You're doing some things for the community nobody else is doing. We are trying to do some things here nobody else is doing. Nobody else is doing because nobody has the courage to take these stands that we take here at allpointstv.com. And we're going to be standing out on some limbs here today as well. And hope you will stay tuned because we are here for the next hour. We come together every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and we tape for an hour. And I hope you will tell your friends about us. We're trying to grow our audience so we can be as big as some of the other networks out there. And we are going to continue to stay here until we get that job done. Today, I wanted to take up a subject I've been planning to do for a while now, but every time I come to the studio and I want to get into some other topics, something else comes up to keep me from doing that, and this is true this week as well. I was watching the Mark Levine program. I don't know if you are checking that out or not. It's a very good program on television. You won't see a lot of laughs on there. It's not a comedy show, and sometimes we don't tune in to programs of that sort because these informational programs do not entertain us because we're not, and I hate to say this, but we're not a very literate society anymore in this country. And that is borne out by the fact that we have not only the scholars that are just simply making a lot of statements that cannot be verified based on the evidence, and then we have the man in the street. And I have to tell you, I was watching a program this weekend, Water's World, and at the end of the program, they did a survey of some folks on the street, and they were asking them some very basic questions, one of which was, and these weren't what you would call rocket science questions. They asked people such questions as, who's the first president of the United States? And people were saying, duh, that was before my time. And they asked the person, who was the president during World War II? And the person said, John, they said, Winston Churchill.
I mean, I've heard some movies and TV shows that had some inaccurate. One guy said that he was saying this was the '90s. They said some guy said, yeah, I was connected to Truman, and he said Truman's been dead for 50 years. Truman hasn't been dead for 50 years. He died in the 70s, and this is like in the 90s. So it's obvious it was like, that was like almost 20 years ago now. But it was a TV show, a TV drama. I went, God, and that your timeline should be checked before they put it out there.
This is you have to laugh to keep from crying. This is some very dangerous stuff here. People have no sense of the past. And you ask them questions about anything to do with our history in this country, and they are just thrown, can't figure anything out, and making all these ridiculous statements. And then we come to the scholars. Last night, Mark Levine, on his marvelous program that comes on at 10 o'clock on Sundays, they had two guests on there to continue the conversation about the impeachment process, since we still have not got off that horse. They're trying to ride it all the way to the election next year because they understand they got a heck of a mountain to climb in terms of defeating Donald Trump. And I have to tell you, they don't have the horse in the barn to bring him out of the stable to run against this president, because this president is doing remarkably well at the mid part of his election, and if you look at the candidates on the other side, all 23, 24 of them, there's nobody over there right now that's going to give Donald Trump a run for his money. You can say what you want to about these polls. Where they got Biden, they got Biden, according to the polls, beating Donald Trump by 10 points if the election were held today. Of course, the election is not held today, so that does not even count. I don't know why we're doing all these polls this early in the canvassing, because we have more than a year, something like a year and a half in it, before we have the next election, electing the president, which would be the 46th president of the United States.
Did you hear what I saw a blurb that said Glenn Beck? Well, I really can't. Did you notice lately he starts to look like Colonel Sanders Jr.?
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, but anyway, he says that right now, if Trump, and he's never been he was a never Trumper, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah, he said, well, if Trump doesn't get reelected, America's gone as we know it.
I heard him say that, John, and I would agree with him. This is probably the most crucial. I tell you what I think it is. This is the most crucial election that we've had in this country, by two other prior elections, and that was the one in 1800 and the one that we had in 1860. And those two are probably more critical. The one in 1800, which saw the election of Thomas Jefferson, that election was critical because we had a president in there that had been voted out, and we didn't know how that would play out because we had no precedent of a politician being voted out of power before, and then the person deciding to stand down because he no longer had the mandate of the voters. That's a first in history, by the way. So that was a very critical election in terms of setting the precedent that after your term has expired and the voters no longer have voted you back into office, you have to stand down. And that's what John Adams did, and that's to the credit of the founders, having put in place the particulars, separating powers and so on and so forth. And after the George Washington, I think another part of it was that George Washington set a precedent of standing down after 2 terms, and for the one coming after him to not go away once the voters had decided to put someone else in the presidency, that would have been a non-starter, but it could have led to revolution in this country if he had not stood down. So that was a very important election, 1800. The other election that was very important in our history was the one in 1860, in which it saw the election of Abraham Lincoln, and that's critical because of the fact that we had a secessionist movement going on in the country where certain states, 7 of them had gone out before he was inaugurated, and then another 4 left the Union and succeeded once Lincoln decided to, in fact, reinforce Fort Sumter. And when they saw him, in fact, doing that, 4 other states that objected to this strong tactic by Lincoln that had no constitutional authority to do what he did, which was to stop secession from taking place, particularly when you understand that the country was founded upon secession, as the 13 colonies had succeeded from Great Britain, and there they are, in fact, exercising the same option that had been exercised in 1776, which is our foundation in this country, and then those states not being allowed to do so and being kept from succeeding by the bayonet, when states that had not succeeded saw the president, in fact, standing against their right to a government of their own choice. 4 states joined the original 7 states that succeeded, and now we have 11 states that are now out of the Union based upon the standing against the secession movement by Abraham Lincoln, who, by the way, was acting in the name of and in the history of King George III, because it was the same obstinance that you had seen in 1776, we're seeing again in 1860. So those 2 elections were very critical in terms of the historical grounding points of this nation. But Glenn Beck is making a point, and I think this point has been weighed in the balance by the American people because we're coming up another critical election in this country, and I think this is the 3rd most critical election that we've had in the history of the United States. I can't think of another election outside of 1800 and 1860 that would trump what we are getting ready to face next year. And that is Donald Trump standing in the gap that has put the progressives in this country on pause because they want this power back, because they want a role in this country. After 8 years of Obama turning the Constitution upside down on his head, running the Constitution mandates in the ground, they thought they were on a roll in terms of 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Hillary Clinton at the minimum, and then continuing what had been going on during the Obama administration or the Obama regime. And Donald John Trump came in out of the constitutional malaise, never having held not only a national office before, a political office before, but it never held a political office before in the history of his legacy. Is the second president. Well, I was going to say Zachary Taylor, but I can remember now Zachary Taylor, who didn't have any, did not hold any political office, but he had a military office, having fought in the Mexican War, called some call it Polk's War, in 1844, and being the hero of that war, ran on his military background and reluctantly became president in 1848. Of course, he only served 16 months in office and died in the presidency and was succeeded by Millard Fillmore. But Donald Trump did not have any military experience and did not have any prior political experience if you consider that he had never been elected to office, so he didn't even have the military background, then didn't have the political background and became president. And that should tell us all something about how the American people are viewing these politicians, because it wasn't Russia that went to the polls. It was the 63 million Americans went to the polls, and their verdict was very clear in what they in fact posited in the electoral process in 2016, and that was the fact that they're tired of what they're getting from these baseless, lawless, can I use that word, lawless lawmakers in this country. And they went to the polls, and 63 million people went to the polls and turned their backs on every one of those political persons running for office. 14 of them in the Republican Party. Nobody, see, that's one thing that's really interesting to me. Nobody has said that the Russians interfered with the election in the Republican primaries, and you had 14 seasoned politicians running in the primaries repeatedly in the Republican Party, and every time that they were running, Donald Trump was coming out on top. If my memory serves me correctly, I don't think that Donald Trump, except maybe there were two exceptions, lost in the primaries. So the American people were voting against politicians and voting for the outsider in the Republican Party. Nobody has claimed now that the Russians interfered in the primaries in the Republican Party, so they're not making that claim that would have been caused by the Russians. They're making a claim that when you had the general election, then the Russians came in from nowhere, and then they began to try to put in place things that would have been to the benefit of Donald Trump, which that's ridiculous also if you understand what was going on during that time period as far as what's happening with the Clinton Foundation and how they were in fact putting money into the coffers of the Clinton Foundation, because no one, including the Russians, expected Donald Trump to have a chance. So all of that is just noise being made. We are coming up, Glenn Beck is exactly right. We're coming up on the most crucial election since 18, he didn't say this, I'm saying this. This is the most crucial election in this nation's history since 1860. And it's not going to be about this. Some people think we can negotiate with these people on the left. Then somehow we are going to convince them of their wayward ways, that they've gone haywire, and we're going to be able to convince them by conversating with them about how wrong they are and where they're trying to take this country. And that's not going to happen. They're going to have to be defeated. And that's why in 2020, they're saying why is Donald Trump not worried about what's going to happen next year? And then people that aren't in the know about how these polls are falsifying the claims now again that Donald Trump doesn't have a shot, Biden is going to beat him, and there's Biden over there can't put a sentence together because of what is obviously the case with Biden. Biden is having the same dementia that you saw with Mueller. And you just get him on the same stage with Donald Trump, and let's see how that plays out. And how did it work out with Hillary Clinton in 2016? That didn't play out very well either. And they had her winning a day before the election by 10 points. And where did that go? They don't have a shot. And unless something very critical takes place, and it has to be very critical, then this election is not going to be won by an outsider. But don't take anything for granted. You have to go to the polls and do what you did in 2016, and that is to go there and get past all the noise, all the impeachment rhetoric, and register your voice at the polls, because these people have got to be defeated repeatedly for a period of time until they get the message that we're not going down this path, that they're taking this country where we are trying to turn this country into a socialist cesspool, which is what it would be if they win. And there was a lot of that momentum toward that direction until Donald Trump came out of nowhere, and the American people, along with Donald Trump, defeated that agenda. And we have no other choice in the matter right now. We have got to continue what we did in 2016. And for a couple of elections, probably on the other side of that, for a while now, until they get the message that we are not going to accept the socialist voice of the Democratic Party that's really become an anti-American. The Democratic Party is an anti-American party today, and it's run by people that hate this country. And Donald Trump, by the way, was very, very good at this man is really quite. He says he's not a politician. Well, maybe not in the traditional sense. But Donald Trump is the consummate politician in terms of being able to overlook the political horizon and then use, I guess what Donald Trump is doing, quite frankly, is using judo tactics. Because what Donald Trump is doing is that he's using the energy and the force of the politicians against themselves. They were trying to the squad, they call them. You know what I'm talking about. The four.
We better not call them out, though. Be called the racist. You know.
Yeah, I'm going to call them out, and I don't care what they see. I'm not moved by what these labels. I'm going to go through the labels to get to the other side of it. And that's what we got to do as a country. We cannot allow them to start calling us names and then we just throw our hands up in the air and start surrendering to what they're doing. We've got to challenge these people. They've got to be opposed with everything it out. We got to throw everything we have at them, including the kitchen sink, because that's just how important this election is. We cannot leave any stones unturned if we want to leave anything to our children and our grandchildren. It's just that serious right now. And I understand what Glenn Beck is saying, because a lot of people I'm coming in contact with, I'm talking to a lot of people, some that were on my Facebook page that found out where I was. Some have been trying to get in touch with me ever since Facebook silenced me. And I was surprised because I don't think I'm listed. Maybe I think I'm listed under my wife's name.
But actually,
as far as the landmine is concerned, land phone is concerned.
I was going to say, I want to encourage people too, though. He does have a Facebook page called What's Going On with George Moss. I post the show's links there from after where they get done here. So he can post there. So I'm trying to encourage him to post there. So if you want to hear from George, maybe you want to drop him a line and say, start posting here. Of course, can't guarantee that the Facebook will be so accommodating, but I would encourage that.
I'm trying to hide out on the radar from Facebook, because Facebook is trying to. They keep talking about Russia interference. What about Google? And what about Facebook? Facebook is trying to have undue influence on the election, and the it's really the internal mechanisms in place that are trying to sabotage elections in this country, because they're trying to silence a voice that can give people the other side of it. And we've got to get out there and try to stop that from taking place, because they got to hear the other side. If we are successful, we will have done some work that will be memorialized in history, because this critical moment that we're in right now, we can actually reverse the course of what was intended by socialists like Barack Obama, because that's who Barack Obama was.
Okay, now I'd like this though. All the times they always said stuff about Ronald Reagan, the Democrats. Bernie Sanders is an old man too, and they're not saying anything about him being old, but they did when Ronald Reagan was in there. So I mean, that just goes to show you the double standard they always live by. This guy, he's too old. Our guy, they overlook it totally. They don't even mention it. That's what when you got this real glaring truth, they have this ability to divert their own gaze towards it. I mean, they can ignore the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I mean,
yeah, they're putting out, John. They know how critical this election is. That's why they're putting out all these stops. I have for example, I have an article here that I brought to the studio. It's called "Liar, Liar." Then there's a colon: Georgia House Minority Leader caught in a hate hoax. And this is Georgia State Representative and Minority Leader Erica Thomas, who is the latest one to push this racial hoax that she was in fact attacked verbally by someone that was pushing Donald Trump's agenda. She was lying through her teeth. I could tell when she was on her site, teary-eyed, crying, so broken up, so hurt, because he had called her, according to her own the allegation she made, had called her an SOB. I guess he didn't even know this was a woman and not a male, but called her SOB. And told her to go back to where she came from, just like Donald Trump was alleged to have told them to go back where they came from, which Donald Trump never did. You got the news right. Donald Trump had told the people that if you don't like it here, then go back to where you came from and then make it better there and show the example, and then come here and tell us how to get it right so you can be happy here. That was the idea. And then you see they're playing the race card, because I was watching the other things they did with that, where they had Donald Trump standing at the podium, and they had the clock going to show you how long it took him to start speaking when they were saying, "Send them back." That's what the crowd was chanting, not Donald Trump. He never orchestrated it. He stood there. They wanted to show you how long he stood there. And to show you how the seconds were ticking off, they had the milliseconds clock was going on the side of the second clock to show you that this was how long it was, make it even seem longer. And they were chanting, "Send them back, send them back." Well, I put a clock up on something else that was being said when Donald Trump spoke before another group. The group that started by Candace Owens, the Turning Point USA. And here's a chant that went even longer. I don't know if you want to time this one. That chant was 4 more years. Did any of you time that chant? I don't think you're interested in timing that one, because the crowd out there, these were Candace Owens has a group that's called Blexit. Although it's called Turning Point USA, it's really called Blexit, Blacks Exiting from the Democratic Party. And they were chanting, anybody put this on CNN? Their chant was 4 more years, 4 more years. And that chant went on even longer than their 13-second chant, where they're talking about sending them back. And they were talking about sending back Talib down here in Detroit, Ocasio-Cortez from New York, the woman from Massachusetts. Let me see if I can get her name. Let's see. That's I don't want to misquote the name, so I'll come back to it. And the fourth person of the squad, who would that be? John, you have the name of that person? We're gonna take we come up on a break. Yeah, there were four of them. Who's the other person that's in that squad? Let's see. We got. I said Tele, Cortez. Oh yeah. How did I forget Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, and then the representative from Massachusetts, and they're all angry. They're very angry. They're very angry at this country, and Donald Trump called them out for being anti-American. And John, can you help me with that other name? I don't want to leave that without. Who is the other person, John? Is it Max Sweeney? What's that lady's name from Massachusetts? You can look it up, then. I want to make sure I get that before I get off the air. Who's the person that is the person that was?
Did you? Yeah, because I remember I was just is it Talib?
No, the one from Massachusetts, the black woman.
Presley.
Presley, that's right.
It's Presley.
I don't know why I forgot that name. Yeah, Presley from Massachusetts, and these four women. Donald Trump called them out, and as he should have called them out. These people are anti-American. They hate this country. And that's why they want to transform it out of the image it was put in by the framers and put it into another image it was never intended to be. And you're not gonna talk them out of it. You're not going to be able to debate them and show them the errors of their ways, quote unquote. They're ideologues, and they are convinced that they're right. The country is, quote unquote, is a racist country. They want to make that claim with no evidence. It's very different from saying they're racist inside of the country, but they're racist inside of every country. And that's why none of those persons that said they're going to leave if Donald Trump was elected, that's why not one of them left. You can call their names out. They were going to leave. Al Sharpton was going to leave. If Donald Trump is elected, we are going to leave the country. And Al Sharpton has not moved not 1 inch, and he had no intention of leaving, because you can't go anywhere where you're going to find a country better to go to than you have in the United States, and that's just a fact. That's why everybody's trying to come here. I'll be in Africa very soon. And I'll be in 3 different countries. So everywhere I go, I already know before going there, because I've been there before, have been in 17 countries. And everywhere I go in Africa, I find people who are trying to find, in fact, when I went to the embassy in one of the countries, and I couldn't even get up to the front window because there were lines. I'll tell you where I was. I was in Dakar. And at the embassy at Dakar, Senegal, they had lines of people that were trying to get permission to get a visa to come to the United States. And of course, it says at the front that if you are an American, come to the front, because they are there to service the Americans that are in other parts of the world. But but the line of people that you go in front of were people in Senegal. They're trying to get out of Senegal, and Senegal is not the worst of the countries in Africa. But they're all trying to come to the United States. And you've heard this song, haven't you? They come to America, or at least they're trying to. And they got these people over here talking about this country is racist, and they got blacks that are now in Maine, Portland, Maine, that are in Portland, Maine, have overrun Maine, and they are from places like the Congo and places like other parts of East Africa. So to get here, they had to go, first of all, from the eastern part of Africa to the western part of Africa, and then fly from there to the United States, and they're doing that to get here. And they got people here talking about they're going to leave, haven't left yet, and they're not going to leave because there's nowhere they can go that's better than what they have in the United States. Let me welcome back the people that are back from WFOV. I want to thank you for coming back at 92.1. But we have got to understand how critical this election is. And Glenn Beck is not saying anything that a lot of people are not saying. Many people are aware of how crucial the election is, and nobody's more aware of it than the Democrats. That's why they keep pulling out these race cards. This Georgia legislator, who is a minority leader in the House in Georgia, crying on her wall, on her site, about how this person, whom she said was white, had told her to go back to where she came from. First of all, the person, she didn't know this, but when she was calling that press conference, she didn't know that the person had heard about the press conference and showed up. The person was Hispanic, and he contradicted everything that Erica Thomas, Representative Thomas, said about what happened in that altercation. And she didn't think there was any video testimony to it because she thought there would be no corroborating evidence that would say otherwise. And now we know, based upon the video that was taken of the incident, and also this article is now saying it, liar, liar. Georgia House Minority Leader called it a hate hoax. And if there's all this racism in this country, then why is so much of it being made up? Not just with Erica Thomas, but about Jussie Smollett and the person they just paid off because we're not getting it. We're not getting these racial hoax. They just paid off Eric Garner's parents, his family, in New York, because they've accepted this guilt. Eric Garner, you remember Eric Garner was supposed to have been choked to death by the New York Police Department. That's because as I said earlier, we don't have literacy in this country. People just cannot figure stuff out in this country. Eric Garner was not choked to death. And if anybody had looked at the evidence of what really occurred there and had looked at even the video evidence, they would have seen that wasn't true. And if you even listen to and understand what Eric Garner was saying, you would know it's not true. First of all, you have to know this about Eric Garner. Eric Garner was an asthmatic. He had asthma, a deep case of asthma. The one that they took down by going to the side of him and then pulling him this way, pulling him to the side. They didn't pull him from the back. And the reason for that is if you pull a person from the back and that person is bigger than you are, you're going to end up on that person's back because all you got to do is lean forward and you're then on his back. And you're not accomplished anything because now you up in the air and you're at a disadvantage because you're on this guy's back. And there's nothing you can do because he can move one side to the other and throw you off there, and then you're on the ground and he's on top of you, and now you're in jeopardy. What they did, they got to the side of him and put him to the side because the knees are not made to bend that way. And when they took him down, because he's asthmatic, he got excited because of that, and they also sit on his chest trying to handcuff him, because until you can't handcuff Eric Garner is considered armed, not with a weapon. His hands are, as long as your arms are also being armed, until they neutralize your arms, your hands, you pose a threat. And they're trying to handcuff Eric Garner, and Eric Garner is refusing and resisting, and they have him on his back, and they are sitting on him trying to get him under control and handcuff him behind his back, and they can't do that given this guy's size by doing it on the side of this guy. And what he says is very important that nobody's figured out because, as I said, this country is not literate. We can't even figure anything out in this country anymore. And that's another indictment of the school system. Eric Garner said he couldn't breathe. And if anybody had understood just that part of it, they would have understood something very critical in this whole dynamic that played out that day.
You know, you just angered probably two groups: the social justice warrior as well as the teachers unions. So it's like you got to keep track of what I'm just keeping track.
Yeah, that's right,
if we get
John.
angry,
and they're going to be very angry with me and a lot of things because of what we got planned down the road in terms of programs we're going to be doing in about 3 weeks. Because I'm going to be doing a series of programs, which I'll announce. I'll announce this at some point. Maybe in 2 weeks, I'll announce what we're going to be doing, because I got 4 programs lined up I plan to do. And if they get angry about what this is about here, they're going to be very angry when I pull the cover off some other things that they're running, because we have got to confront these people. And I don't care about them getting angry. We got to. We're in the death throes right now. They got us in a chokehold, and we've got to fight to get their hands from around our throat. And this is very serious. Eric Garner was saying, if we listen to what Eric Garner was saying, that's very critical even in what he was stating. Because if you understand that asthma is a breathing problem, and by him even saying repeatedly, I can't breathe, that indicates something very important here, that none of you social justice warriors even care to think about. By saying that he couldn't breathe is an indication that he had been there before. Because asthma is a breathing problem. If it had been something else that was causing that he couldn't breathe, such as being choked, he would, because there's something different in his having breathing problems, being asthmatic, he would have said, you're choking me, which he never said. And that's because he wasn't choked. You can look at the video and see it. But because whites in this country, mostly white liberals, who are a big part of the problem, are so quick to jump into feeling guilty about anything having to do with racial discourse in this country, that you can't even criticize the squad, these 4 people of color. Let me tell you something. Everybody in this country is a person of color. I knew that as a kid growing up because they gave us crayons in 1st grade. And after I got through with brown and black and blue and green, there was a white color in that box also. And white is a color. I would say this, they made a movie of a person having a color. It was called, John, you know what the name of that movie was? It was called The Invisible Man. He didn't have any color because he was invisible. But if there's visibility, everybody in this country is a person of color. So you can get off that right now. And anybody, by the way, anybody that uses the words black and brown people, vote against them automatically. As if there is an alliance between black and brown people in the United States. Blacks and browns in this country are at war with each other. And that's why there's a book out called Blacks and Latinos, the Presumed Alliance. There's no alliance between blacks and browns in this country. Go out to Los Angeles and see it. Go to Chicago and see it. There's no alliance between blacks and Hispanics. The alliance is every group in this country is allied with its own members. There's an alliance between the Chinese and Chinese. There's an alliance between Jews and Jews. There's an alliance between Italians and other Italians. But the issue is, are they in the alliance with each other? Are they anti-American? And they're not. You can be for your group and still be American, and that's what Burgess Owens is trying to say. That you can be in alliance with your own group and still be pro-American. You can be pro-black and be pro-American. And they think that and they're trying to make it appear that the squad that is certainly anti-American is because of something going on in peculiar about what they're doing to black people in this country. That's a contradiction even there, because if you are saying the country is racist and you are against racism because you're people of color, then how you are going to justify that you're in the Democratic Party, which is a party par excellence where racism was being practiced in this country and still is. The Democratic Party is a party of racism. Go back and look at the history of it. The Ku Klux Klan is born out of the Democratic Party. And for them to be talking about racism as a problem and then be Democrats, that's a contradiction. There's irony in that. Because the Democratic Party is a party of racism in this country. And the only reason that they have to make up this racism right now with these cases by Erica Thomas and Justice Smollett is because the Democrats are no longer doing what they were doing to black people, which was lynching black people to keep them from the polls, because blacks are voting for Democrats right now. And that's why they put down the rope. You don't have to lynch black people anymore. They are going to the polls to vote for the party of the lynchers, because they've told them that it's a matter of civil rights, and all the civil rights leaders in the Democratic Party right now are leading on that train. Burgess Owens, I was just saying, I mentioned his name a few minutes ago. Burgess Owens wrote a book which every person in this country should read. It's called Liberalism, How to Turn Good Men, he should have said women also, how to turn good men into whiners, W-H-I-N-E-R-S, weenies, W-E-E-N-I-E-S, and wimps. And that's what liberalism has done to blacks in this country. Turn them into whiners, weenies, and wimps. Complaining about everything, by doing nothing to resolve the problems. The latest example of that is when Donald Trump said, as he should have said, that in Cummings District, over in Baltimore, he got out there and criticized Cummings. Why? Because Cummings out here talking about, look at the border, look at what the president is doing at the border. He got people over there huddled up and so on and so forth at the border, and the president came back to defend himself and said, look at Cummings District. Now the president's racist for pointing that out. Why? Because Cummings is a person of color. You know what Burgess Owens said in an interview he did in 2016? He said, yes, I will accept that black people are oppressed in this country, and the solution to it is that Cummings and John Lewis should resign right now from their positions immediately. Said that in 2016, and also called for all the members of the Congressional, I use Rush Limbaugh's words for him, the Congressional Black Caucasian Caucus. Owens said they should all resign immediately. He said that he played football for two outstanding quarterbacks, Joe Namath and Plunkett. And he said that when they could no longer produce, and including himself in that, he said when we could no longer produce, we all retired. Well, those people that have been up there all these years in the Congressional Black Caucasian Caucus, they have not produced anything for Cummings' district. That's exactly what Donald Trump said about it. Rodent-infested district, violent. You can say that about all the urban communities. that have these congressional Negroes in it. Not one of them is safe. Not one. In the whole country. And they have the nerve to be calling Donald Trump a racist for pointing out that they have these cesspools that they have in their districts that they're representing. He could have also included Maxine Waters in that. Maxine Waters doesn't even live in the district that she's representing. She's living in a district over there that's 12% black. But she's representing a district that is overwhelmingly black because she does not want to live in that cesspool that she represents. She's living in a $4 million house, not in the district that she represents. And people are dumb enough to continue to elect this woman who claims to be representing them in California. She's not representing anybody in that district. She doesn't even live in the district. And people are dumb enough to go to the polls and continue to put these Democrats in there, and all they do every 2 years is holler racism, and then black people go to the poll and continue to vote for these people who have not done anything for them in the last 50 years. And if they've done anything to benefit the black community, point the black community out. Point out the black community in any urban city in this country that has a great school system. You used to have great schools in these cities. Every one of those schools has been run down, and Cummings District is not the exception to it. And he's up here complaining about the president criticizing, they're complaining about the president criticizing Cummings. Cummings deserves to be criticized, and they need to throw him out of office. Because all of them are representing these districts that are these cesspools. And all they do is play the race card. And they play it every 2 years, and black people keep falling for it. Because we have a literacy problem in the country. There's a literacy problem in this country that you can tell people the same noise over and over and over again, and they go to the poll and vote in the people that are failing them and put them back in power by playing the race card, as Erica Thomas was doing. Liar, liar, Georgia House Minority Leader caught in a hate hoax. That's all they're running on the American people, hate hoax. Because the racism they claim has stopped being the problem in this country because black people became Democrats. When blacks were Republicans, in the South, where Martin Luther King was in fact demonstrating from 1955 to 1968, I guess you're aware that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was situated totally in the South. The whole civil rights movement was in the southern states. And why would that be the case? Because King is trying to stop the Democratic Party from its oppression of black people. And if you go look at the chart, in 2008, when Obama was elected president, none of the Confederate states, there were 11 of them, none of them voted for Barack Obama except Virginia and North Carolina. The other 9 didn't vote for Barack Obama. And that wasn't because they had, that those states were racist. That was because of what had happened in terms of the political reformation of the South. And that was this, that as the South became less racist, they became more Republican. You can go look at the chart and see it. As the South became less racist, the South became more Republican. And therefore, they voted against Barack Obama in 2008 in 9 of the Confederate states, because by that time, the Confederate states had become Republican states. And that's why, if you look at that chart, you'll see that Barack Obama did not carry the former Confederate states. And if the civil rights movement accounted for his election, you would have seen that where the civil rights movement was in fact practiced more so there in the South than it was anywhere else. And why is it that he carried other states and then carried the southern states? where the SCLC was in fact housed, in the southern states of the United States, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Why did Obama become elected president? If the southern states where the SCLC was housed didn't vote for him, what accounts for what accounts for Barack Obama being elected in 2008 over John McCain is because the country is not the racist place they said it was. And the civil rights movement didn't cause that. Because what the civil rights movement was, that vote was not in the camp of Barack Obama. You can forget that noise about racism. The racism in this country was the racism of the Democratic Party and the leadership in that group. And once that was in fact calmed down in that party, the racism against blacks that was directed and targeted against blacks, that ceased in this country. You can say what you want to. Go look at the evidence. Because what you're saying about the racism in America, that's not true. America is not a racist country. America is a country like all the others, but better. Does it have racists in it? Yes. But there are more pedophiles in this country than there are racists. Because the Democrats no longer, out in the open at least, overtly come out with overt racism. They're now a covert racist. Because they found another way to get the job done. And that is claim that everything is about civil rights. It's like a magnet to black people. If you tell them, for example, that abortion is a civil rights issue, that they should have it because whites have it, they can do what Margaret Sanger could not do. Margaret Sanger was trying to sell this, the abortion in the black community, speaking before the Klan groups, going before the Ku Klux Klan and meeting with the Klan, wrote a letter to Clarence Gamble. You probably know the name from Procter and Gamble, the soap, Palmolive soap, all those different detergent type things that are put out by this company. Gamble received a letter from Margaret Sanger. And the letter said, we must not let them know that we intend to exterminate them. And so blacks were abhorrent about the abortion because they understood the intent behind it. Now they made abortion a civil rights issue. And what's the response of blacks in that case? Black women make up 6.5% of the population of the United States. And they make up 40% of the abortions in the country. In other words, 6.5 times their number in the population, they account for 6.5 times the percentage of the population of the abortion in the United States by simply rephrasing what it is that you're doing. So rather than extermination and genocide, it's now a civil rights issue, and now they're clamoring for the right to have it because they reposition it inside of the party of the Ku Klux Klan, who couldn't get it done the other way, so they're doing it this way, under the banner of civil rights, and they're falling for it again this time. But I don't think it's going to work in 2020 because there are black people that are leaving that plantation in droves. Turning Point USA, those that are saying walk away, that's happening. And people are doing that, and that's why you have liar, Georgia House Minority Leader caught in a hate hoax, because they are panicking about the fact that black people are leaving the Democratic Party. If blacks vote 20%, and that may well be a number well within reach. If blacks vote 20% for Donald Trump in 2020, this election is already over. In fact, Donald Trump got about 12% of the vote, as quiet as it kept in 2016. If he gets 15 to 20% of the black vote, and the black vote does not vote in significant numbers otherwise, because many of them are going to stay home, if you get 20% of the black vote, and a number of blacks don't go to the poll because they don't see anything to vote for in the Democratic Party, so many of them will stay home. But if they went to the poll, they would vote for Democrats. If they stay home because they don't see anything to vote for, and they have 20% that go to the poll and vote for the man that has given them the lowest unemployment numbers they have in the United States since the end of slavery in this country, and they go and vote for Donald Trump, that party cannot win. And Donald Trump will win in a landslide. I think that it's going to be a landslide election next year. And don't ever underestimate how they'll intensify the race card, because they know what this means. They need these blacks to be kept on that plantation for 2020 in order to have a shot at defeating the 45th president of the United States. And right now, Donald Trump is on a roll. President Trump, do what you're doing. There are more people with you in the black community than the polls are showing. And you do have a lot of support in the black community, as it should be, because you've done a great job for blacks in this country. Okay, we're going to get out of here, and we'll see you next week. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.